Hi, everybody. This is Kim Crum, and with me today is Bonnie Omer Johnson. And together we are co editors of a book, the Boom Project book, Voices of a Generation. You may have guessed that means we're baby boomers, born between 1946 and 1964. And our book, which we were so pleased to edit and publish in 2019, has 47 writers and poets in it. And we're going to be introducing a lot of them to you during the course of the next year or so. So anyhow, today we're going to start off with me interviewing Bonnie Omer Johnson. And we have been writers together for a number of years, graduated from the Spalding MFA program here in Louisville, Kentucky. And we started our writing careers seriously in midlife, which we hope will be an example to anyone who thinks that you can't start something new in the middle of things. So Bonnie, welcome to the Boom Zoom room.
Thank you, Kim. It's nice to be here.
So here's our book here. Like I said, Bonnie's got one behind her, but we're not going to be talking about the book today. We're going to be talking about Bonnie. She's going to start off by reading to us, and our format is going to be similar every time we meet. We're going to invite writers who are first featured in our Boom Project book, and they're going to read an excerpt of their most recent work and then talk about their creative journey and process and their craft secrets. So Bonnie, I understand you're going to read something today for us. Can you tell us a little about it?
Yes, this is a piece that I've titled On Joy. To me, there's a difference between joy and happiness. One is more long-term and internal. The other sometimes comes from externalities. And this is a response to a prompt that I got from you, Kim, in the Shape and Flow Writing Studio, where I continue to take classes every 6 weeks or so. That has kept me writing and expanded my writing horizons. Which is something I suggest for all writers.
Me too. So go for it. Yeah, we're ready. Okay.
Well, Keats says that a thing of beauty is a joy forever, but the word thing lacks specificity, is somewhat unimaginative, and it overlooks the touches of whimsy that lubricate life's hinges. The hinges made rusty by tears of loss and disappointment that we all face. Joy is the light red umbrella stitched from safety nets that we sew to protect ourselves when we lose our balance on that tightrope stretched between this world and the next. Light red represents joy, passion, sensitivity, and love. So I think joy is also finding the hope of finding the end of a rainbow. It's a parasol, an umbrella that protects us when happiness eludes us, when circumstances thrash against us and even disables our serenity, attacks with a barrage of errors and renders us helpless. Joy is the steel door on our spirit that locks out despair. Threatened by the circumstances, that can capture our financial security, our health, our contentment, even our identity. Joy is lifeblood pumping through our veins and capillaries, our essence generated and manufactured within the deepest parts of us. Scattered showers of happiness in our relationships, our accomplishments, our possessions, our components of joy, but joy is internally generated, while the accoutrements that mimic joy and offer temporary relief from the angst gathering under the same umbrella, are external forces we construct in our efforts to find joy. Mountaineer author John Krakauer claims that the joy of life comes from our encounters with new experiences, and hence there is no greater joy than to have an endlessly changing horizon, for each day to have a new and different sun. Like Krakauer, I too find that a lot of joy just in the journey, being born, having a life, being allowed to breathe, to exist, means that we have a purpose, that we have a reason, and I believe a responsibility to live it, to find it. Realizing that, and then owning it, knowing just that I am, brings me a lot of joy. I agree somewhat, but not completely, with Mark Twain, who says to get the full value of joy, we must have someone to share it with, and to divide it with. But I would say to you, consider the solitary moments of early morning when a streak of pink glows under a robin's egg blue sky, when all that separates us from the heavens are window panes and bare branches of a mile-high winter tree, thick trunked. I hear birdsong and relish the gift of hearing, and want to shout, I can see. My brain captures those images like the finest Nikon camera photo, and stores it in a holy place where gratitude and uninhibited child's laughter reside, to float like bubbles or balloons filled with helium. I leave you with words of Percy B. Shelley, who says, I have drunken deep of joy, and I will taste no other wine tonight.
Oh, very nice. Nice ending, especially with the poet. Now, that feels to me like what we would call a lyric essay these days, because of the imagery and the lyricism of the language, almost like a poem when you're reading it. What would you call that essay?
It was actually an exploration of what I think joy to be. I was reaching for a joy story, as we often do when we sit down. We're looking for a story, but it turned into something else. It turned into part of the process. And it was very satisfying as an exercise. And sometimes that's the way it goes when you're writing, because I sit down to write something and something else comes out.
That's wonderful. And that's the way it should be. Yeah, the key is to sit down and write something, right? Yeah. So anyhow, I felt like that felt so poetic to me. I'm wondering, have you ever written poetry before?
I have tried. I love poetry. It was my first aspiration in the writing world, but I write very bad poetry, and I'm too wordy. I can't get the images and the constraints of good poetry down. So yes, I've had a number of attempts at writing poetry.
Yeah, and primarily what you write, fiction mostly, or?
Fiction and what you would say creative nonfiction,
yes.
Or hopefully creative nonfiction.
Okay, good. Tell me a little bit about the first thing you published.
The first thing I got published actually was a 4-line poem when I was 8 years old. and I knew only rhyming couplets at that time. And it's really hard to compete with the master of rhyming couplets, William Shakespeare. My poem said was about spring. It was about this time of year, and it went exactly like this: Spring has sprung, the grass has riz. I wonder where the birdies is.
I love it.
And that was not comparable to the poetry that I was enjoying reading.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. You have the sense of humor even then. Yeah. Okay. Tell us a bit about what inspires you on a regular basis to write, or do you need to be inspired? Do you have a regular writing routine, or do you wait for inspiration?
Oh, I don't wait for inspiration. I do find inspiration just about everywhere. I love looking at people, but not necessarily the standard American standard of beauty. I love to see the crags and the wrinkles in the very old people. I love to see children's faces because they're so expressive and they're so true. There's no inauthenticity in a small child's face or exuberance or discomfort or displeasure. So I find inspiration anywhere that I go. Obviously, nature feeds me in more ways than one, and I never fail to sense awe in nature, whether it's the bark of a tree or the flower of a tree, music, food, words, just hearing a word I haven't heard before, or hearing words put together that I wouldn't have thought of before, are very gratifying and inspirational to me.
Okay. So you neither wait for inspiration. You don't really wait for inspiration because it's all around you. You're, and I think what you said is, that this is writing as a journey. And earlier you talked about joy being an exploration, which is, I think, for me, and probably for most of the writers I know, that's the reason for writing, is the exploration. That's part of the journey is, I didn't know that. I just learned something, or I just thought about this differently, or maybe I became slightly profound as I was considering these things.
That's always been my aspiration.
That is, yeah. But a little philosophical and
I fall way short.
Moments of clarity.
I think as much as anything, writing helps me not only explain the world around me to me, it helps me process and explain who I am to me. If I can put something down in words that make sense to me, then I know myself better. Mm-hmm. And I know the world around me so much better because I've been able to contain it in sentences or in attempted sentences to explain to me.
Okay, good. Knowing yourself better, knowing the world better. I like that a lot. Do you have favorite writers, living or dead, or certain writers that you really study for your own writing craft?
Actually, I'm often asked who my favorite writers are, and it happens to be almost whomever I'm reading at the moment. Oh. But as a small child, when I learned to read, the object was to read something with a lot of pages. I was always sad, and still am, when a book ends. So that it's like losing, there's a loss, especially if it's a good book that resonated. So I loved Dickens and early on, and I loved a lot of the 18th century writers who write long periodic sentences, which because I could linger there. Or there's a contemporary author who lives here in Louisville that you know too, Kirby Gann. And I have often said that his words are places that I would like to wallow in. Like I would like to lie down and make snow angels in his paragraphs.
Ooh, I love it.
An author that makes me feel that way is is a favorite author. And sometimes it's just a phrase. Sometimes it comes from a plot. Sometimes it comes from identifying with their descriptions. It just depends on what techniques are used.
Okay, good. I love you're good with metaphor. I know that for a fact, but that one was a wonderful one. I want to make snow angels in his paragraphs. So we're hoping Kirby Gann will see this video.
I think I may have even told him that.
Okay. Okay. That's great. That's great. Is there any kind of writing that you don't want to do? Any writing that you kind of avoid?
Sometimes I like to avoid those things that are unpleasant, and as much as anything, not because of their not needing to be told, but I think so much when we're writing really personal things, it's easier to avoid them. That not because of the actual events, because events are very clear. Events are those kinds of things that have a beginning, they happened, and an ending. And but the impressions maybe of the less than pleasant events are so much of so open to avoidance because because they're open to misinterpretation. So I avoid those, in that if something is an impression that I had that may be unpleasant, we don't really know whether that occurred one time, 5 times, or every day.
Yeah.
And so it's just easier to not go there than to risk going down a road that there's no point in going down. And so I do avoid those kinds of things.
Personal stuff is usually why people avoid creative nonfiction. So, but exploratory essays like Philip Lopate would write on something or against something.
Exactly.
I'm not safe territory. Yes, it's good territory. Beautiful. All right. Finally, before we close, I do want to know if you have any writing secrets you'd be willing to share for the audience.
Well, one that I have consistently used and continue to is taking a phrase out of a poem, or because poetry is designed to speak to your emotions, and maybe even use it as a title or as a place to jump off into another writing project. And then more recently, I've taken a very, very mundane phrases when I'm trying to fill out my writing. And I was reading some of James Baldwin the other day, and he was talking about a character that was about to do something, and it says on the page that there was no one else on the street except a boy whistling. And then goes on with it, and I thought, oh, well, I could increase the scene if I used that. So I borrowed, lifted, stole, but since it wasn't a piece that that I even used in a similar context, I didn't consider it plagiarizing, and it was not it wasn't anything but just something he inserted. So it's easy. And it was something I did the same with. It didn't become any part of an idea. So in that respect, I think we can learn constantly from reading other authors.
Yeah, and borrowing from them, not just technique, but sometimes ideas from phrases and setting and scene. I like that. Okay, I like that a lot. Okay, Bonnie, do you have anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we close today?
Well, I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah, haven't we? Yeah.
I do believe everybody has a story. I do believe everybody needs to write down something, just so that the generations in the future will have something to read of theirs. And people often want to avoid writing leaving any kind of a legacy memoir for their families, either because there's something in it they don't want to tell, or they don't actually want to start with, was raining the morning I was born on March 6th, whatever that happens to be. And that's not it at all. They can make lists. They can write, whether it's one paragraph, one page, or a 600-page tome, whatever they put down is like their fingerprint. It is a unique identity thing for someone to remember and hold on to. So it's important that they can write about one birthday or one Christmas or one gift they gave somebody, one disappointment. And that's more than will be down on the page than if they don't do it at all. So I really encourage people to write a little or a lot.
Or a lot. Yeah, people are often afraid to take writing workshops because they're afraid they might find out they're not a good writer. And there's no such thing really as not a good writer.
Exactly.
My central view is if you love to write.
Yes.
And try to grow your writing and learn from your writing and learn about writing. And that, in fact, is what our YouTube channel is going to be about.
Exactly.
So, thank you, Bonnie, so much for everything, but especially for this interview.
Well, thank you, Kim. It was very painless.
It was. And so we'll stop recording now. And thank you, everyone.